There's a new God of War game coming out, and it looks like a cash grab, to be honest. It does not look that good or that original at a first glance, but maybe there's something more there. Maybe there's something that we're missing because the masses don't really like this game, and usually when the masses are saying something altogether, they're kind of wrong. So, is it possible that people are wrong because the initial reaction to this new God of War Lofty game is a little bit negative. People are saying, what does this have to do with Kratos? We're not even gonna see him. You're just using the title of God of War just because it was famous and successful, and you're trying to profit off of him without even having him in the game. What's the point? This is just so ridiculous. People are calling this Karen of War. They think that it's gonna be stupid, and can you really blame them? Because at the same time, you see that maybe they're expecting way too much of us. Don't get me wrong, I played the last two God of War games, the new ones, and I also played the last ones. And what you could notice is that the games became more and more sanitized over time. They were more like Disney like, they were less brutal, less morally kind of ambiguous. You got a Kratos that was kind of sanitized overall, and it's just Disneyfication more and more overall. This game is basically focused on a character who was a pile of ashes in the last two games. That was it. Are you expecting a little bit too much from us? Because when a trailer comes out for a new game, right, you have the character and you hype them up and you make them look very cool, and that happens here in this trailer, right? Don't get me wrong. Laufey has interesting combat. It looks different from Kratos. It's not just like a Kratos ripoff. It looks interesting. Like, this could be interesting and fun to play. You play around with magic and spells and all that stuff. You know, it looks very cool and flashy and dopamine inducing. You know, don't get me wrong. At the same time, right, you don't know this character. For all the people that didn't play the other games, you could have Kratos fight the previous bosses, for example. You could do stuff like that so that you revisit the characters in a way where they've developed after he killed them. You know, they went through a certain journey in the afterlife and they became different or scarier or more menacing. You could have that. Like, you could have Kratos as a side character fighting in this, and you can take control of him at the same time, but in a way that doesn't take too much away from the protagonist, which is going to be his wife in this game. It's going to be interesting what they do. They're probably going to be using a lot of projectiles, stuff that you fight, ways of combat that are different from just Kratos's axe and just brutal power and just fists and hitting and smashing everything. But I still hope that they keep that same brutality, you know, and you see some traits maybe of Kratos in her. There's probably going to be some callbacks. I hope that this isn't too different from the original games. It doesn't look that different, to be honest, in terms of graphic wise, and the way the polished look that it has. But it really makes you think, why couldn't they just call this something else? Some people are saying that you could have called it Gods of War. You could have called it a different type of title. Isn't that a little bit too cheap to call this God of War when it's not really a God of War game? And the God of War isn't even in this, but other people are saying that Kratos hasn't been God of War since, you know, a previous title. Like, officially he's not a God of War. So I guess they can get away with that, but still, it feels a little bit cheap. You know, but at the same type of thought that I have is that you could do this and you could do it in a good way, but maybe there's a little bit more that we need to see in terms of why you should buy this game. But it looks interesting enough. A lot of people are probably going to skip this, and this might end up an undervalued gem. It's going to be interesting to see what really happens with this and how well it ages over time. Is it going to be a respectable part of the God of War series, or is it just something that was like Yeah, that happened, I guess. You have no personal connection with her whatsoever. She doesn't have that much of a backstory, and she's just Kratos' wife. Is that really enough to carry the entire game, to carry the entire premise? Probably not. And to be honest, aren't we a little bit tired of studios having something interesting, an interesting character who we enjoy playing as, and then they move on to the other younger version of that character, or the newer version, like this is the new Kratos. What I'm happy about is that they just didn't just straight up do The Last of Us. They didn't just kill Kratos and then move on to his wife. Okay, they did not completely kill off that franchise the way The Last of Us did, where they can't even make a third game anymore. That's good, right? On the other hand, this is just feels like a middle game while we're waiting for the next sequel. And isn't that just like, pointlessly wasting time? Is there really any meaning to doing this at all whatsoever? No, you're just kind of wasting time until you get to the next game, which is gonna be based in like Greece or Egypt or something like that, So at the same time, that's good and all. It's probably going to be a fun game, but it feels a little bit unnecessary. It feels like the character hasn't been built up that well. And the magic though, the combat looks great. The people are probably gonna play this, but it's not going to be maybe as successful as the last two games. Now, is it going to be a good game though? I think there's so much potential. Think about the potential of this story. The entire premise is that Laufey goes through the afterlife and she's trying to get to a certain place. Think about that, right? You can make so much with a story about the afterlife and really expand that entire universe. We had Norse mythology like Scandinavia in the last games, and now you get to see the afterlife. I hope there's something that's a bit darker as well, because in God of War Ragnarok you had a vision of hell basically, and that was just like a freezing typical Viking frozen landscape, right? I hope here there's something a bit more nightmarish, a little scarier, and all the enemies look very interesting, but hopefully there's more variation than just what you saw in the trailer, where you saw like some forests and some interesting landscapes, but you could really push this and make it a little bit more provocative. Think about it, all the gods, all the characters that God killed in the last games, you can have them here. You can have Odin, you can have all of these other dudes, and you can revisit them again. You can fight certain characters and have like little callback moments to those. That could be interesting. And don't forget that Kratos, there was a time where he actually died. Like, he died in a certain scene in a certain place in the game when he was fighting Thor, and then he got brought back to life. He got resuscitated. So he could be in this game, and we don't really know how time works in that universe, but you probably have Kratos and you could play as him, so there's a lot of potential there, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do with this entire premise. Let me know what you think. Do you think that this is going to be an interesting game? Is it going to be fun to play, or is it just another cash grab? I personally thought the design, the aesthetic looked good, but hopefully they don't mess this up and they make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more meaningful. Yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.